Sarah Hawkins clutched the shears with trembling hands, watching her chestnut locks tumble to the cabin floor like autumn leaves. Each decisive snip severed more than hair. It cut away the life she'd known, the daughter she'd been raised to. The future laid out before her like a neatly stitched quilt. The face, staring back from her mother's tarnished mirror, belonged to a stranger, sharp-jawed, determined, hair roughly shorn to the nape. She bound her chest with strips of cotton until her breath came in shallow gasps, then donned her late brother's. Clothes, shirt hanging loose to hide her figure, trousers cinched tight with a leather belt, boots stuffed with rags to match her small feet to his larger ones. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Samuel Hawkins, she practiced, her voice deliberately pitched. Lower, rougher at the edges. The name, her brother's name, felt strange on her tongue, but necessary. The Texas Rangers wouldn't accept Sarah, but they might take Sam, especially with the Apache raids intensifying along the border. They needed every man they could get. 3 days ago, her world had collapsed when raiders struck their homestead. She'd been in town, trading eggs for supplies. Her return revealed only smoke, blood, and the broken bodies of her family. Father sprawled by the well, mother crumpled on the porch steps, little sister half hidden beneath an overturned wagon. Only her brother had died fighting, his rifle empty beside him. The Rangers had come too late, as they always did. Captain Jack Harding had removed his hat, offered condolences wrapped in empty promises of justice. "We'll find who did this, miss. You have my word. Words, just words. The law wasn't riding fast enough, wasn't reaching far enough. The homesteaders remained vulnerable while bureaucrats in Austin debated funding and jurisdiction. Something inside her had hardened then, crystallized into purpose sharp as broken glass. Her decision was simple. If justice wouldn't come to her family, she would bring it herself. The Ranger recruitment station in Fort Davis had been set up in the back room of a saloon, the air thick with tobacco smoke and whiskey fumes. A grizzled sergeant looked her up and down with skeptical eyes. "You ever fired a gun, boy? Killed a man?" "Both," she'd answered, her voice carefully measured. It wasn't a lie. Her father had taught all his children to shoot, and during the last Comanche raid 2 summers back, she'd defended their livestock with deadly accuracy. "My family was just killed by Apaches. I aim to make that right." The sergeant's expression had softened marginally. "Vengeance is a poor reason to join, but it'll do for now. Captain Harding's Company D leaves at dawn. Get yourself a bedroll, and a horse if you've got one. Now." As the first pale fingers of dawn stretched across the horizon, Samuel now, waited by the livery stable, her family's chestnut mare saddled and ready. 22 men gathered in the dusty street, checking cinches and loading ammunition. Their faces were weathered, eyes wary, bodies hardened by frontier life. No soft edges anywhere. Captain Harding arrived last, his bay stallion prancing beneath him. His gaze swept over the assembled recruits, pausing briefly on Sarah. "You're the Hawkins boy," he said, recognition flickering across his features. "Didn't mention you had a brother when we found your folks." Sarah's heart stuttered, but her voice remained steady. "Never came up, sir." Harding studied her a moment longer. "You're mighty young. Old enough to shoot straight," she countered. "Old enough to bury my family." Something that might have been respect crossed his face. "We'll see what you're made of soon enough. Rangers don't coddle new blood. Don't expect—" "Coddling, sir? Just a chance." Harding nodded once, then addressed the company. "We're tracking a band of Apache raiders led by Black Knife. They've hit 3 homesteads in 2 weeks. Our job is to find them before they strike again. It's rough country ahead, gents. Anyone not prepared to ride hard and shoot straight should turn back now." No one moved. Sarah kept her spine straight, eyes forward, mimicking the stance of the men around her. "Mount up," Harding ordered, and the company sprang into motion. As they rode out of Fort Davis, Sarah felt eyes on her back. Glancing over her shoulder, she met the steady gaze of a ranger riding just behind her. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a silver-flecked beard and knowing eyes. Daniel Byrne, he introduced himself, spurring his horse alongside hers. Most call me Bear. Sam Hawkins, she replied, deepening her voice. Know these parts well, Sam. Born and raised near Horsehead Crossing, she answered truthfully. My pa taught us every trail and waterhole between here and the Pecos. Bear nodded approvingly. Good. Captain values men who know the land. His eyes narrowed slightly, though you don't look much like a man just yet. How old are you, boy? 19, she lied. At 22, she was older, but her smooth face would raise fewer questions if they believed her a youth on the cusp of manhood. 19, Bear echoed doubtfully. Well, out here it's not years that age a man, but what he's seen and done. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small burlap pouch. Tobacco. Chew it. Rangers expect it, and it'll roughen that voice of yours. Sarah accepted the pouch with a nod, uncertainty fluttering in her stomach. Bear's eyes held something, knowledge, or suspicion, she couldn't tell which. But his advice seemed genuine, protective even. Thanks, she managed. He tipped his hat. Rangers look after their own, boy. Remember that. As they rode into the rising sun, Sarah felt the weight of her deception pressing down like a physical thing. The tobacco pouch felt heavy in her pocket, a reminder of how much she had yet to learn about being a man in this company. But beneath the fear ran a current of fierce determination. The Apache who'd massacred her family were out there, and wearing her brother's clothes, carrying her father's rifle, she would find them. Whether as Sarah or Samuel, she would have justice, or die in the attempt. What she hadn't counted on was Captain Jack Harding's piercing gaze, returning to her again and again as they rode, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle that didn't quite fit together, 4 days into the Apache hunt, Sarah's muscles screamed with a pain unlike anything she'd known. Ranch work had hardened her, but nothing prepared her for riding dawn to dusk, sleeping on rocky ground and maintaining constant vigilance. Worse than physical discomfort was the mental strain of her disguise, remembering to stride rather than step, spit instead of swallow, lower her voice, and hide when nature called. The company followed a dry creek bed through scrubland where mesquite and prickly pear offered little shade against the punishing Texas sun. Sarah chewed Bear's tobacco, fighting nausea as the bitter juice coated her tongue. She'd watched the other rangers closely, learning to spit with reasonable accuracy, though she swallowed more than was advisable. Captain Harding halted the column with a raised hand. The silence was immediate. 22 men frozen in their saddles, eyes scanning the horizon. Sarah followed their gaze to a thin spiral of smoke rising from a ridge 2 miles distant. Might be a campfire, Bear muttered beside her. Might be trouble. Harding motioned for his lieutenant, a whip-thin man named Garrett with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. They conferred briefly before Harding addressed the company. We split here. Garrett takes half the men around the South Ridge. I'll take the rest through the canyon. If it's Black Knife's band, we need to know their numbers before engaging. The captain's eyes swept the rangers. Byrne, Carson, Jenkins, Rodriguez, Hawkins, with me. The rest with Garrett. Sarah's stomach tightened at being chosen for Harding's group. She'd hoped to remain anonymous in the ranks, not under the captain's direct scrutiny. Stay close, Bear advised, as they separated from the main company. Watch the captain, not your own shadow. They entered a narrow canyon where hooves echoed against limestone walls. The air hung still and hot, carrying the scent of dust and horse sweat. No birds called, no insects buzzed. The silence pressed against Sarah's ears like cotton wool. Dismount, Harding ordered, when the canyon narrowed. Further. Lead your horses. Hawkins, take point. You said you know these trails. Sarah swallowed hard, passing her reins to Bear. She moved ahead cautiously, scanning for signs of passage. broken twigs, disturbed stones, tracks in the occasional patch of sand. Her father had taught her to read the land as clearly as any. "Book, trail's been used recently," she reported, keeping her voice low and gruff. 3, maybe 4 riders, unshod ponies." Harding appeared at her shoulder, so suddenly she nearly startled. "How can you tell they're unshod?" "Depth of the impression," she answered, pointing to a faint hoofprint. "Angle of the stride. Apache ponies are smaller too, different from cavalry mounts." The captain studied her face with unsettling intensity. "Your father teach you that?" "Yes, sir. He scouted for the army before settling down. He taught you well." Something shifted in Harding's expression, not suspicion exactly, but a keener interest that made Sarah's skin prickle. "What else do you see, Hawkins?" She scanned the narrow passage. "They're watching us right now." The words had barely left her mouth when a war cry shattered the canyon's silence. Apache warriors materialized on the ridge above, arrows raining down like deadly hail. "Take cover!" Harding shouted, dragging Sarah behind a boulder as arrows thudded into the dirt where she'd stood. The canyon erupted in gunfire. Sarah drew her brother's rifle, its weight familiar in her hands. An Apache warrior appeared on the ridge above them, drawing his bow. She sighted, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. The warrior fell backward, his arrow flying harmlessly into the sky. "Good shot," Harding acknowledged, firing his revolver at another attacker. Bear bellowed from somewhere to their left, the boom of his shotgun echoing off canyon walls. Rodriguez screamed. A wet, terrible sound cut suddenly short. Carson returned fire, his rifle cracking in measured shots. Sarah reloaded, fingers steady despite her racing heart. This wasn't her first fight, but the sheer savagery stunned her. The Apache moved like ghosts, appearing and vanishing between rocks, their shots devastatingly precise. "We need to reach higher ground," she told Harding, eyeing a narrow trail that zigzagged up the canyon wall. "We're fish in a barrel down here," the captain nodded sharply. "Cover me." He sprinted toward Jenkins, who had taken an arrow to the thigh and was struggling to stem the bleeding. Sarah fired systematically, forcing the Apache to duck behind cover. As Harding dragged Jenkins to shelter, "Path up the wall," Harding shouted to Bear. "Get Carson and move." Sarah provided covering fire as her companions scrambled toward the trail. An arrow grazed her shoulder, slicing through shirt and skin. She hissed but kept firing, emptying her rifle before running to join the others. The climb felt endless, bullets and arrows peppering the rocks around them. Jenkins groaned with each jolting step as Bear half-carried him upward. Carson brought up the rear, turning periodically to fire at their pursuers. They reached a small plateau halfway up the canyon wall. Bear pulled Jenkins into the shelter of an overhang while Carson positioned himself as lookout. Sarah helped Harding create a defensive perimeter with loose rocks. "Rodriguez?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Dead," Harding confirmed grimly. 5 arrows center mass. The attack below had ceased, but Sarah felt the weight of hostile eyes watching their position. "They're regrouping," she murmured, "probably circling to come at us from above." "You've fought Apache before," Harding observed. It wasn't a question. "Enough to respect them." She checked her ammunition. 12 rounds left, plus whatever was in her pistol. "They won't waste men on a frontal assault. They'll wait us out or try to separate us." Harding studied her with that same penetrating gaze. "You're not what you seem, Hawkins," her heart stuttered. "Sir? Most green recruits would be pissing themselves right now. You're calculating odds and tactics." Relief flooded her, followed immediately by fresh tension. "My pa believed in preparation, not panic." "Smart man." Harding turned his attention to Jenkins, whose face had gone grey with pain and blood loss. "He won't last long without proper care." The arrow had pierced clean. Through Jenkins' thigh, the shaft broken off in the fall. Blood seeped steadily around the wound. "I can help," Sarah offered, caution momentarily forgotten. "My mother was a healer. Without waiting for permission, she knelt beside Jenkins, examining the wound. The arrowhead needed extraction, the bleeding stopped. She'd assisted with similar injuries before. Need a knife, she told Harding, and something to cauterize with. The captain handed over his hunting knife without question. Bear produced a flask of whiskey and a bandana. "Drink," she ordered Jenkins, holding the flask to his lips. To Bear, she said, "Hold him down. This will hurt." Sarah worked with focused precision, cutting around the arrowhead to ease its extraction, applying pressure to stem the bleeding, then cauterizing the wound with the heated blade of Harding's knife. Jenkins bucked and screamed against Bear's restraining grip before mercifully passing out. Throughout the procedure, she felt Harding watching her hands too small and smooth for a ranch boy, moving with a healer's practiced grace rather than a hunter's rough efficiency. "Where's Lieutenant Garrett?" she asked, hoping to divert his attention. "Should have heard the shooting. If he hasn't responded by now, he's either engaged elsewhere or didn't hear us," Harding replied, his eyes still on her bloodied hands. "Canyon walls can distort sound." A low whistle from Carson interrupted them. "Movement. North Ridge." They tensed, weapons raised, but instead of Apache warriors, Lieutenant Garrett appeared with his detachment of rangers. "Took your time," Harding called up to them. "Ran into a welcoming party of our own," Garrett answered. "Lost Wilson. Found something else, though. Their camp. Empty now, but fresh signs, women and children, too. A village, not just a war party," Harding concluded. "They're moving their people, which means we're closer to their main force than we thought," Sarah added, forgetting to roughen her voice. Harding's head turned sharply at her higher pitch, eyes narrowing. Before he could comment, Apache war cries erupted from multiple directions. The brief respite was over. "Here they come," Bear growled, raising his shotgun. "And they've brought friends." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the stories. The second Apache attack came as sun and shadow played across the canyon walls. Warriors seemed to materialize from the very rock, their war paint stark against the limestone backdrop. Unlike the first assault, this one came with calculated precision. Arrows, arcing from multiple angles, forcing the Rangers to split their defensive fire. "They're herding us," Sarah realized, ducking as an arrow whispered past her ear. The Apache weren't aiming to kill, not yet. They were directing the Rangers' movement, driving them towards some unseen trap. "Captain!" she shouted above the gunfire. "It's a funnel!" Harding didn't waste time questioning her assessment. "Fall back to the western edge," he ordered. "Tight formation, wounded in the center." The Rangers complied instantly, moving as a disciplined unit. Sarah found herself shoulder to shoulder with Bear as they retreated, firing methodically at any target that presented itself. The big man's presence was oddly comforting, solid and dependable amid the chaos. "You've got good instincts, boy," he grunted between shots. "Not instinct. Logic," she corrected, reloading with practiced efficiency. "They want us on that ridgeline." She nodded toward a narrow shelf of rock that offered apparent safety. Perfect spot for an ambush. Bear relayed her observation to Harding, who altered their course accordingly. Instead of climbing higher, they skirted the canyon wall, keeping to what cover they could find. The change in tactics seemed to confuse their attackers briefly, just long enough for Garrett's men to establish a crossfire from their higher position. Caught between two forces of Rangers, several Apache warriors fell. The others melted back into the landscape as quickly as they had appeared. "Hold your fire," Harding commanded, as silence descended once more. "Conserve ammunition." Sarah's pulse gradually slowed from its frantic rhythm. She counted their forces, 4 men in their immediate group, 13 with Garrett minus the fallen Rodriguez and Wilson, 18 Rangers against an unknown number of Apache warriors. Not favorable odds in unfamiliar territory. "We need to move before dark," she said quietly to Harding. They know this terrain better than we do. Night favors them. The captain's piercing gaze found hers again. Most men wouldn't be thinking that clearly after their first firefight. Not my first, she reminded him, careful to keep her voice low and gruff. No, he agreed thoughtfully. I suppose it isn't. The combined Ranger force made their way carefully down to the canyon floor, collecting Rodriguez's body on their return. Jenkins, drifting in and out of consciousness, was secured across his horse. Sarah checked his wound. No fresh bleeding, though fever would be the next concern. Black Knife's main camp can't be far, Garrett reported as they regrouped. The village we found was temporary. Signs indicate at least 30 warriors, plus their families. 30 against our 18, Bear calculated grimly, not counting those already watching us. Harding studied the horizon, where the sun hung low and bloated. We've lost the element of surprise. Prudence says we return to Fort Davis, report what we've found, and return with reinforcements. A murmur of agreement passed through the exhausted rangers. Only Sarah remained silent, bitter disappointment rising in her throat. Reinforcements meant weeks of delay. By then the Apache camp would be long gone, and with it her chance for justice. Something to add, Hawkins. Harding's voice cut through her thoughts. She hesitated, aware of all eyes turning toward her. A recruit questioning the captain wasn't wise, but neither was abandoning the mission when they were so close. The Apache know we're tracking them now, she said carefully. They'll scatter into smaller bands, harder to find. If we turn back, we lose them. And if we press on, we might lose more men, Garrett countered. Sarah stood her ground. They won't expect us to continue after this engagement. We have darkness as cover, same as them. And I know a water source 2 miles east that won't be on any army maps. We could rest, tend our wounded, then circle around by dawn. Harding's expression remained unreadable. That's a bold strategy from a new recruit. I didn't join to be cautious, sir, she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. I joined for justice. Something that might have been approval flickered across the captain's face. Show me this water source on the map. Sarah approached, acutely conscious of standing close to Harding as she indicated a small spring hidden in a rock formation. His presence was commanding, his clean scent of leather and gunpowder distinct from the other men's unwashed bodies. She'd noticed his hands earlier, strong and capable, but unexpectedly gentle when tending the wounded. It's defensible, she explained, pushing away inappropriate observations. Natural rock walls on 3 sides, single approach that can be guarded. My father and brother used it as a hunting camp. Harding studied the location, then looked up at the darkening sky. 2-hour ride in the dark. Risky. Life out here is risk, she countered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. So it is. He turned to address the company. We make for Hawkins Spring. Minimal noise, no lights. Anyone who can't maintain discipline stays behind with the wounded. No one volunteered to remain behind. These were Texas Rangers, stubborn and proud to a man. As they mounted up, Bear sidled his horse alongside hers. Captain doesn't often take advice from new blood, he observed quietly. You've made an impression. Not sure that's good, she muttered. Depends on the impression. His eyes, shrewd beneath bushy brows, held a warning. Be careful, Hawkins. Harding notices things others miss. The company rode out as darkness swallowed the landscape. Sarah led them through terrain she'd known since childhood, navigating by starlight and memory. Mesquite gave way to rocky outcroppings, the air cooling as they climbed in elevation. No one spoke. Even the horses seemed to understand the need. For silence, their hoofbeats muffled against sandy soil, Sarah felt rather than saw Apache eyes tracking their movement. Shadows flickered at the edge of her vision, gone when she turned to look directly. They were being watched, evaluated. Yet no attack came. The tactical restraint was more unnerving than open aggression. They reached the spring near midnight, As Sarah had promised, it nestled within a natural fortress of rock, a small pool of precious water reflecting starlight. The men established a defensive perimeter with practiced efficiency, setting watches and tending to Jenkins, whose fever had begun despite Sarah's earlier care. She volunteered for first watch, needing solitude to gather her fraying nerves, perched on a boulder overlooking the single approach to their camp. She allowed herself a moment of doubt. Was she being reckless, pushing the company forward? How many men might die because of her thirst for vengeance? Second-guessing yourself, Hawkins. She stiffened as Captain Harding materialized beside her, moving with a silence that would impress even the Apache. She hadn't heard his approach. A dangerous lapse in awareness. Considering consequences, sir, she answered carefully. A rare quality in someone so young. He settled beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the desert night. Oh, chill. Most men your age think only of glory. Glory doesn't interest me. No, he agreed. Vengeance does. Vengeance does. She didn't deny it. They killed my family. And you think finding them will bring peace? The question caught her off guard. She'd expected judgment, not philosophy. I think finding them will bring justice. Peace is asking too much. Harding studied her profile in the darkness. Your voice changes when you forget to guard it, he observed casually. Her blood froze. Sir? Higher when you're focused on something else. Lower when you remember your role. His tone remained conversational, as if discussing the weather. Your hands, too, are interesting. Calloused in some places, smooth in others. Not a ranch hand's hands. Sarah's mouth went dry. I don't know what you're implying. I think you do. He shifted slightly, his shoulder brushing hers. I've been watching you, Hawkins. The way you sit your horse, sideways when tired, like someone trained to ride with a different posture. The way you hang back when the men relieve themselves. Your knowledge of healing rather than just hunting. Each observation landed like a physical blow. How had she been so transparent? The tobacco was clever, he continued. Bear's suggestion, I assume? Captain, she began, but he raised a hand. To silence her. I'm curious how long you thought you could maintain the deception, he said. The Rangers aren't a forgiving institution. If the men discovered a woman among them, are you going to expose me? The question emerged as barely a whisper. Harding's eyes, reflecting starlight, revealed nothing of his intentions. That depends on your answer to this. Who are you really? And why risk everything to join this hunt? The moment stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Sarah understood she stood at a crossroads. Truth might end her quest for justice, but preserve her life. Continued deception would likely lead to discovery by less understanding eyes than Harding's. She made her choice. My name is Sarah Hawkins, she admitted, her true voice emerging for the first time in days. Samuel was my twin brother. We were identical in all but gender, same height, same build, same features. When the Apache killed my family, I became him because a woman alone has no power to seek justice. A ranger does. Harding absorbed this without visible reaction. The Apache attack wasn't random, was it? No, she swallowed hard. My father was once a cavalry scout. He led soldiers to an Apache camp 10 years ago. Women and children died in that raid. I believe Black Knife remembers. Blood for blood, Harding murmured. A cycle as old as these. Mountains, will you send me back? She asked directly. The captain's silence lengthened, broken only by the soft calls of night birds. When he finally spoke, his words surprised her. How well can you track Apache in their own territory, Sarah? Hawkins. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Harding wasn't sending her back, at least not yet. I track as well as any man in your company, she answered, caution tempering her relief. Harding nodded once. Then for now, you remain Ranger Hawkins. His voice hardened. But understand this. Your deception puts every man here at risk. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and you compromise this entire mission. I'm aware of the stakes. I don't think you are. He leaned closer, his face shadowed. In the starlight, these men would die for a fellow ranger. They've accepted you as a brother in arms. How do you think they'll feel learning they bled for a lie? The question struck deep. She hadn't considered the betrayal from that angle, only her own desperate need for justice. Not all lies are created equal, Captain, she countered softly. Would they have accepted a woman's tracking skills, no matter how accurate? Would my gender have mattered more than my abilities? Harding's silence acknowledged the truth in her words. I didn't choose deception lightly, she continued, but I chose it knowing what was at stake, for me and now for your men. Our men, he corrected unexpectedly. You've earned that much with your actions today. The rest remains to be seen. The faint praise warmed her more than it should have. What happens after we find Black Knife's band? One problem at a time, Hawkins. He rose to his feet. Your secret stays between us for now. Don't make me regret that decision. As Harding moved away, Sarah released a shaky breath. Her secret was safe, conditionally. She'd bought time, nothing more. Dawn arrived in watercolor streaks across the eastern sky. The Rangers broke camp efficiently, speaking little. Fatigue etched lines in every face. Yesterday's skirmishes had taken their toll. Jenkins' fever had worsened overnight, his skin burning beneath Sarah's touch as she changed his bandages. He needs a doctor, she told Harding. Real medicine, not just field care. The captain's face remained impassive. Then we'd best finish this quickly. As the company prepared to move out, Bear approached, offering her a strip of jerky. Eat. Day's going to be long. She accepted gratefully, suddenly aware of gnawing hunger. Thanks. Captain had you on watch all night? He asked, eyeing her drawn features. Most of it. Bear nodded thoughtfully. Puts a lot of trust in you for a new recruit. Sarah chewed her jerky, unsure how to respond. Bear seemed genuinely concerned, yet something in his tone suggested curiosity beyond simple camaraderie. I know the territory, she said finally. Makes me useful. His bushy eyebrows drew together. Watch yourself with Harding. Man's got layers most don't see. Before she could ask what he meant, Garrett called the company to order. They mounted up, moving out in tight formation. Sarah found herself riding point beside Harding, her role as tracker now official. The landscape changed as they rode east, scrubland, giving way to scattered pine and juniper, rock formations rising like sentinels against the sky. The air cooled as they gained elevation, carrying scents of resin and wildflowers. In different circumstances, Sarah might have appreciated the beauty. Now she scanned constantly for signs of their quarry. There, she murmured, reining in beside a narrow game trail. Sliding from her saddle, she knelt to examine the earth. Pony tracks, small band moving fast, within the last day. Harding dismounted, crouching beside her. Scouts? Probably. She indicated subtle marks in the dust. 4 riders, 1 leading. A spare mount, no women or children with this group. His shoulder brushed hers as he leaned closer to see the tracks. The casual contact shouldn't have registered amid their dangerous circumstances, yet Sarah found herself acutely aware of his proximity, his scent, the quiet intensity with which he studied both the sign and her interpretation of it. They're circling behind us, she added, forcing her mind back to the task at hand. Classic Apache tactic, scouts monitoring our movement while the main band relocates. Can you find their new camp? She nodded. If we follow these scouts, they'll eventually return to their people. Risky, Harding observed. They'll spot us. Not if we stay parallel to their trail, just out of sight. She stood, dusting off her hands. My father taught me to shadow Apache without detection. It requires patience. Something flickered in Harding's eyes. Respect, perhaps. Then we shadow them. Carefully. The company followed Sarah's lead, maintaining distance from the Apache, scouts, while keeping their trail in sight. It was painstaking work, requiring constant vigilance and frequent stops to confirm direction. The day stretched endlessly, the sun climbing to its zenith and beginning its westward descent. Twice they froze in place as Apache scouts passed nearby, close enough that Sarah could see the hawk feathers decorating one warrior's braids. Each time the Rangers remained undetected, their discipline impeccable. By late afternoon, signs indicated the scouts were converging toward a central location. Sarah signaled a halt as they crested a ridge overlooking a sheltered valley. "There, down there," she whispered, passing Harding her spyglass. Through the glass, the Apache encampment spread below them, wickiups arranged in a defensive circle, smoke rising from cooking fires, women working hides while children played. Warriors stood guard at strategic points, their weapons ready. "I count 34 braves," Harding murmured, "plus women and children." "Black knife?" Sarah asked, scanning the encampment. "There." Harding pointed to a tall figure emerging from the largest wickiup, the one with the silver bands on his arms. Sarah's heart stuttered as she studied the Apache leader through the spyglass. He moved with fluid grace, his face severe and proud beneath intricate paint. This was the man responsible for her family's deaths, not a faceless enemy, but flesh and blood. "Now what?" she asked, her voice tight. Harding surveyed their position. "We've found them. We return to Fort Davis for reinforcements as planned." "That will take days," she protested. "They'll be gone. Attacking now would be suicide, Hawkins. Even you must see that." She did see it, and hated the logic that demanded patience when vengeance seemed so close. "At least let me study their camp, movement patterns, guard rotations. Information we'll need when we return." Harding hesitated, then nodded curtly. "1 hour, Bear goes with you. The rest of us hold position here." Bear looked less than pleased with the assignment, but nodded his agreement. "Come on, boy. Let's see what trouble you can find us." They worked their way down the ridge, using natural cover to approach the camp's perimeter. Sarah's heart thundered so loudly she feared the Apache might hear it. Bear moved with surprising stealth for such a large man, his weathered face focused in concentration. "Guards change at sunset," she whispered, noting the movement patterns. 4 points, rotating clockwise." Bear grunted acknowledgement, jotting observations in a small notebook. They circled a quarter of the camp's perimeter, gathering what intelligence they could without risking detection. As they prepared to withdraw, shouting erupted from the camp. Sarah flattened against a boulder, Bear beside her, as Apache warriors rushed toward a returning scout. The man's horse was lathered with sweat, its sides heaving. "Something's wrong," Bear muttered. The scout's report sent the camp into frenzied activity. Women began dismantling wickiups while warriors gathered weapons. Black Knife stood at the center, issuing commands with sharp gestures. "They're breaking camp," Sarah realized. "But why? They can't know we're here." A sudden crack of gunfire answered her question. From the opposite side of the camp, rifles flashed, but not from Ranger positions. Apache warriors fell as bullets tore through the encampment. Women screamed, children scattered in terror. "Army patrol," Bear growled, "must have been tracking the same band." Sarah watched in horror as the organized attack cut through the Apache camp. This was no careful Ranger operation. It was a slaughter, indiscriminate and brutal. "We need to get back to Harding," Bear urged, tugging her sleeve. But Sarah couldn't move, transfixed by the sight of Black Knife rallying his warriors for a counterattack. The Apache leader fought with deadly precision, his rifle dropping 2 soldiers before he switched to knife and tomahawk. "Hawkins!" Bear hissed. "Now!" She tore her gaze away, scrambling after Bear toward the ridge where Harding waited. Behind, The sounds of battle intensified, rifle fire, war cries, the screams of the wounded. They were halfway up the slope when Sarah glanced back. What she saw froze her blood. Black Knife, blood streaming from a wound in his side, was leading. A small group of warriors directly toward their position. They had been spotted. Run! Bear shoved Sarah ahead of him, his rifle already swinging toward the pursuing Apache. Get to the captain! She scrambled upward, loose rock sliding beneath her boots. The sound of Bear's rifle cracked once, twice, followed by return fire from below. Sarah reached the crest of the ridge to find Harding and the Rangers already in defensive positions. "Apache on our tail," she gasped. Army patrol attacked their camp from the south side. Harding cursed under his breath. Army was supposed to be 50 miles east. Who's leading the patrol? Couldn't see, she panted. Bear! As if summoned by his name, the big man appeared over the ridge, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. 6 warriors, coming fast, he reported, dropping beside them. Black Knife himself leading. Garrett handed Bear a bandana to stanch his bleeding. Perfect. Caught between Army and Apache with no coordination. We have the high ground. Harding assessed coolly. Rangers, prepare to engage. Clean shots only. Conserve ammunition. Sarah checked her rifle, fingers steady despite the hammering of her heart. Below, Black Knife's warriors advanced with disciplined precision, using rock formations for cover as they climbed. These were no ordinary braves. They were experienced fighters who had survived countless battles. Black Knife is mine, she murmured. Sighting down her barrel, Harding shot her a sharp glance. This isn't personal, Hawkins. It's duty. It's both. The Apache closed to effective range. Rifles barked from both sides as the Rangers and warriors exchanged fire. Sarah held her position, waiting for a clear shot at Black Knife. The Apache leader remained elusive, directing his men while staying protected. A warrior fell to Garrett's rifle, then another to Carson's. But the Apache return fire found marks of its own. Jenkins cried out as a bullet shattered his already wounded leg, and a ranger named Parker slumped forward, a red blossom spreading across his chest. "They're flanking right," Sarah warned, spotting. 2 warriors circling wide. Harding redirected fire instantly, his command presence ensuring the Rangers functioned as a cohesive unit despite the chaos. Sarah found herself admiring his calm under pressure, the way he anticipated each Apache maneuver and countered it. A flash of movement caught her eye. Black Knife himself, darting between boulders as he worked his way closer to their position. Sarah tracked him, exhaled slowly, and squeezed her trigger. The shot went true, striking rock inches from the Apache leader's head. He dropped to cover, then turned his face toward her position with uncanny accuracy. Even at this distance, she felt the intensity of his gaze, as if he recognized something in her, not as a ranger, but as Sarah Hawkins. "He knows," she whispered, the realization chilling her. "Knows what?" Bear asked, reloading beside her. Before she could answer, new gunfire erupted from behind the Apache warriors. The Army patrol had followed the fleeing warriors, completing the trap. Caught between Rangers above and soldiers below, the Apache found themselves in an untenable position. "Cease fire," Harding ordered his men. "Let the Army finish this. No sense wasting ammunition." Sarah lowered her rifle reluctantly, watching as the soldiers closed in on the remaining warriors. Black Knife and 2 others broke away, disappearing. "Into a ravine the soldiers hadn't covered. They're escaping," she protested. "Let them go," Harding replied. "Our mission was to locate their camp, not engage in direct combat. The Army can pursue." Frustration and relief warred within her. Black Knife would live another day. The man who had ordered her family's execution was slipping away, yet the thought of killing him in cold blood no longer satisfied her as it once had. The sight of the Army's brutal attack on the Apache camp, women and children included, had complicated her thirst for vengeance. A soldier in Lieutenant Barr's appeared at the base of the ridge, waving for contact. Harding signaled Garrett to remain with the wounded, while he, Sarah, Bear, and 2 others descended to meet the patrol. Captain Harding, the lieutenant, greeted them with a crisp salute. Lieutenant James Bishop, Fort Stockton, didn't expect to find rangers in these parts. Likewise, Lieutenant, Harding replied coolly. Your patrol is well outside Fort Stockton's jurisdiction. Bishop shrugged, unrepentant. Following hostiles. Same as you, I expect. With different methods, Harding observed. We were gathering intelligence, not firing into a camp with women and children. The lieutenant's face hardened. These savages butchered 3 families last week. Took scalps, Captain. Women's scalps. Children's. You see that enough times? You lose patience for niceties. Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. So you become what you hunt. Bishop's eyes narrowed as he took in her slighter frame and smooth features. And who might you be, boy? Ranger Hawkins, Harding interjected smoothly. One of my best trackers. Bit young for a ranger, Bishop remarked, still studying Sarah, with unsettling intensity. Almost pretty enough to be a girl, almost pretty enough to... Bear shifted subtly, placing his bulk partially between Sarah and the lieutenant. Boy tracked Apache signs that your men missed completely. Shows what experience counts for. Bishop seemed about to pursue his observation when one of his sergeants approached with news. 3 warriors escaped north, sir. Scouts are following their trail. Let them run, Bishop replied dismissively. We destroyed their camp, killed most of their fighting men. That band won't trouble settlers again. Black Knife escaped, Sarah pointed out, unable to contain herself. He'll gather more warriors, strike again. Bishop turned to her with a patronizing smile. Eager for blood, aren't you, boy? Don't worry, Army will handle Black Knife when the time comes. Like you handled this engagement? Harding's voice held dangerous quiet. Lieutenant, I'll be including your patrol's actions in my report. To Austin. Firing into a camp indiscriminately violates standing orders regarding Apache engagement. The lieutenant's smile vanished. You write whatever report you like, Captain. My men know what these devils deserve. He turned away, signaling his patrol to form up. We're returning to Fort Stockton. You're welcome to ride with us if your men need medical attention. We'll make our own way, Harding replied stiffly. As Bishop marched back to his men, Bear leaned closer to Sarah. Army lieutenant with something to prove. Dangerous combination. Sarah nodded, but her mind was elsewhere, following Black Knife's escape route, calculating how long before he would regroup and seek revenge. Not against random settlers this time, but against those who had destroyed his band. Against them, the Rangers gathered their wounded and dead, preparing for the long journey back to Fort Davis. Jenkins's condition had stabilized thanks to Sarah's continued care, though his ranger days were likely finished. Parker and Rodriguez would return across their saddles, a grim reminder of the mission's cost. As they prepared to ride out, Harding appeared at Sarah's side. You're troubled, Hawkins. Black Knife is still out there, she said quietly, checking. A saddle cinch, and you didn't get your vengeance. It wasn't a question. Sarah looked toward the northern horizon, where the Apache leader had disappeared. I thought it would be simple. Find him, kill him, balance restored. She shook her head slowly. Nothing's balanced now. Justice rarely is, Harding observed, especially out here. What I saw today wasn't justice, from either side. She met his gaze directly. My family's dead. Nothing changes that. But perpetuating this cycle of killing. Harding studied her with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond her disguise to the woman beneath. You're learning what every ranger eventually discovers. The territory doesn't offer clean solutions, only complicated choices. So where does that leave me? She asked softly. That, he replied, depends on what you want now that you're original so. Purpose has shifted. The question lingered as they rode, Sarah's mind turning over possibilities she hadn't previously considered. She had joined the Rangers as Samuel Hawkins seeking vengeance. What place could Sarah Hawkins find once that quest ended? They made camp that night in a protected draw, the mood somber as they tended the wounded and posted extra watches. Sarah found herself assigned to guard duty alongside Harding, the captain apparently reluctant to let her out of his sight. "Lieutenant, Bishop was watching you too closely," he explained as they patrolled the camp's perimeter. "He suspects something." "Does it matter now?" she asked. "The mission's effectively over. We return to Fort Davis, report what happened. I'll disappear before anyone asks too many questions." Harding stopped walking, turning to face her. "Is that your plan? Disappear?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Sarah looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they stood beneath the star-filled sky. "What other option exists?" She countered softly. "A woman can't be a ranger." "No," he agreed. "But a woman with your skills could serve in other capacities. As a scout, perhaps, or an interpreter for peace delegations." Hope flickered unexpectedly. "You'd recommend such a thing, even knowing my deception?" "I recommend capability wherever I find it," he answered simply. "The territory needs people who understand both sides of this conflict. People who can see beyond vengeance to something more constructive." Before Sarah could respond, Bear's urgent whistle cut through the night. They rushed back to camp to find the big man pointing toward the northern ridge. "Signal fires," he reported grimly. "Apache pattern, 3 peaks." Sarah followed his gesture, counting the small flames dotting the distant heights. "That's not 3, she said, dread building as she continued counting. "That's 7. "What does it mean?" Garrett asked, joining them. "It means Black Knife works faster than we anticipated," Harding answered, his face grave in the firelight. "He's calling warriors from other bands." "For what purpose?" Garrett pressed. Sarah met Harding's eyes, the same understanding passing between them. "To hunt rangers," she said quietly, "and soldiers. They're done raiding homesteads. This is war. This—" Morning came with preternatural stillness, as if the desert itself held its breath. Sarah woke from fitful sleep to find the Rangers already breaking camp, movements hushed and efficient. Across the valley floor, dust clouds marked the army patrols. Retreat toward Fort Stockton, Lieutenant Bishop apparently unconcerned by the night signal fires. "Fools," Bear muttered, nodding toward the distant soldiers, "riding straight and proud like they've won something." Sarah checked her weapons with hands that ached from yesterday's climb. "They've just stirred a hornet's nest. And we're closer." "To the sting," Bear agreed grimly. "Captain wants to see you." She found Harding studying maps with Garrett, their faces drawn with exhaustion and concern. The captain beckoned her closer without looking up. "Apache signals continued through the night," he informed her. "At least 3 separate bands responding to Black Knife's call." Sarah studied the map, mentally calculating distances. "We're here," she indicated. "With Fort Davis 2 days' hard ride southwest. Army patrol heading southeast toward Fort Stockton. That leaves the northern pass undefended," Harding finished. "If Black Knife brings warriors down through Diablo Canyon, he cuts off both escape routes. The strategy's elegance wasn't lost on her. He's hunting us specifically, not just any white men. This is personal for him now." "As it was for you," Garrett observed pointedly. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, and I've seen where that path leads." Harding rolled the map with decisive movements. "We have wounded men who won't survive a running battle. Our best chance is to reach Thompson's. Stationed by nightfall, 14 miles south. Ranger outpost there can provide reinforcements and medical care. 14 miles across open country," Garrett calculated. "Apache territory." "All territory is Apache territory when they choose to make it so," Harding replied. "We move in tight." Formation, wounded, protected in the center. No stops unless absolutely necessary. As they mounted up, Sarah found herself positioned near the middle of the column, beside Jenkins. The wounded ranger's face had gone grey with fever, his leg crudely splinted and bandaged. He wouldn't survive another day without proper care. "Hang on," she encouraged him, checking his bindings. "Just until nightfall." Jenkins managed a weak smile. "Never thought I'd take orders from a peach-faced boy." Sarah froze, uncertain how to respond, but Jenkins continued deliriously. "Good hands, though, gentle, like my sister's." She adjusted his blanket without comment, relieved when he drifted back into fevered sleep. How many others harbored similar observations? Her disguise had served its purpose, but like all deceptions, it grew harder to maintain with time. The company rode out under Harding's watchful command. Sarah divided her attention between scanning the horizon and monitoring Jenkins' condition. Beside her, Bear maintained a vigilant guard, his shotgun resting across his saddle. "That army lieutenant," he said suddenly, breaking hours of silence, "he looked at you wrong." Sarah tensed. "Wrong how?" Like he was seeing something the rest of us missed. Bear's eyes remained fixed on the landscape, like when a man stares at a puzzle piece that don't quite fit. "Maybe he just doesn't like rangers," she deflected. Bear's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. "Maybe." After a careful pause, he added, "Course, maybe he's just never seen a woman wearing breeches before." The words struck like physical blows. Sarah's hands tightened convulsively on her reins, her mount sidestepping nervously in response. "Easy," Bear soothed, though whether to her or the horse remained unclear. "You ride well, shoot better, and tracked Apache sign when seasoned scouts missed it. Don't much matter to me what you're wearing while you do it." "Does the captain know you know?" she asked quietly. "Captain knows I ain't blind." Bear's voice held no judgment, only matter-of-fact certainty. "Question is, how many others have figured it out?" Before she could respond, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Harding signaled a halt, pointing toward a ridge where heat waves distorted the horizon. Sarah squinted against the glare, making out the silhouettes of mounted figures observing. "Their progress." "Apache?" Garrett asked, shading his eyes. "Watching, not attacking," Harding confirmed. "They're tracking us." Sarah counted 7 riders spread across the ridgeline, scouts reporting their position back to Black Knife. The Apache made no attempt to conceal their presence. This was intimidation, a demonstration of confidence. "They want us to see them," she said quietly. "They're herding us like cattle." Harding nodded grimly. "And we're letting them for now. Keep moving." The punishing sun climbed higher, beating down on riders and horses alike. Water ran low despite careful rationing. Jenkins' condition deteriorated as the day progressed, his breathing shallow and labored. By mid-afternoon, the entire company was coated in alkali dust, lips cracked from dehydration. Sarah wiped sweat from her eyes, scanning the familiar landscape. They were making good time despite the conditions. Thompson Station perhaps 5 hours away. The Apache scouts maintained their distance, occasionally disappearing only to reappear on another ridge, always watching. A faint sound caught her attention, not from the scouts, but from behind their column. She turned in her saddle, squinting at a dust cloud rising from the southwest. "Riders," she called to Harding, "fast approach." The captain ordered defensive positions, the rangers forming a protective circle around their wounded. Sarah gripped her rifle, heart pounding as the riders drew closer. "Cavalry patrol," Bear identified first, recognizing the distinctive formation. "Flying army colors." Relief swept through the company until Sarah counted the approaching force. Nearly 20 mounted soldiers led by a familiar figure. "Lieutenant." "Bishop," she warned Harding. The captain's jaw tightened. What's he doing riding this direction? His orders were to return to Fort Stockton. The army patrol closed the distance quickly, Bishop raising his hand in greeting as if they were chance travelers on a Sunday ride. His smile didn't reach his eyes when he reined in before Harding. Captain, fortuitous meeting. We've decided to provide escort for your wounded. Harding's expression remained neutral, though Sarah detected the tension in his shoulders. Generous offer, Lieutenant, but unnecessary. Thompson's station is just a few hours' ride. I insist, Bishop replied, his gaze drifting across the Ranger. Company until it landed on Sarah. Especially given the Apache signs we've observed. Wouldn't be right to leave fellow white men vulnerable. The words rang false even before Bishop's next signal. At his gesture, his soldiers fanned out, effectively surrounding the Rangers. "What is this, Lieutenant?" Harding demanded, hand drifting toward his sidearm. Bishop's false congeniality vanished. "Military jurisdiction, Captain. I'm taking command of this operation." "On whose authority?" "Mine." Bishop's smile turned predatory. "Apache war parties gathering is a military concern. Rangers are confined to civilian protection and law enforcement." The standoff crackled with tension. 20 soldiers against 17 exhausted Rangers. A fight neither side could afford, with Apache scouts watching from the ridgeline. "This is irregular, Lieutenant," Harding stated carefully. "So is disguising a woman as a Ranger," Bishop countered, pointing directly at Sarah. "Military intelligence noted the Hawkins homestead had a daughter, not a son. Samuel Hawkins died 3 years ago of fever." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Her carefully constructed identity unraveled with devastating simplicity. "That true, Hawkins?" Garrett asked, shock evident in his voice. Before she could respond, Bear moved his horse between her and Bishop. "Don't matter what's true or not. We've got Apache war parties forming and wounded men needing care. This ain't the time for petty jurisdictional squabbles." Bishop's face hardened. "Step aside, Ranger. That woman has violated federal law by impersonating a peace officer. She'll be taken to Fort Stockton for proper sentencing." "Like hell!" Bear growled, raising his shotgun. "Stand down!" Harding ordered sharply, his command cutting through the tension. "Both of you!" To Sarah's surprise, the captain dismounted, approaching Bishop with measured steps. "Lieutenant, whatever concerns you have about Ranger Hawkins can be addressed after we've reached safety. I propose we combine forces to reach Thompson's station, where we can resolve these matters properly." Bishop considered the offer, clearly calculating odds and outcomes. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Very well, Captain. Combined escort to the station, but the woman rides with my men." "Unacceptable," Harding replied without hesitation. "My Rangers. My command until we reach the station." Something in his tone, absolute, authority tempered with dangerous calm, made Bishop reconsider. "Keep her with your company, then, but she rides under guard." Harding turned to Sarah, his expression unreadable. "Ranger Hawkins, surrender your weapons." The order struck like a physical blow. After everything they'd been through, after he'd promised to protect her secret, Harding was capitulating to Bishop's demands. "Captain," she began, but his slight headshake silenced her. "Your weapons, Hawkins," he repeated, his eyes conveying something beyond his words. "For now." Understanding dawned slowly. This was strategic, not betrayal. Sarah handed over her rifle and pistol with deliberate movements, keeping her face impassive despite the storm of emotions beneath. "Ranger Byrne, you're responsible for—" "Hawkins," Harding ordered. "Keep close watch." Bear nodded, moving his horse alongside hers as the combined forces prepared to move out. "Trust the captain," he murmured for her ears alone. "Man's playing a longer game than Bishop can see." Sarah watched Harding remount and take position at the head of the column beside Bishop. The captain's shoulders remained straight, his bearing confident, despite the lieutenant's obvious hostility. "What happens at Thompson's station?" she asked Bear quietly as they resumed their journey. The older ranger's face settled into grim lines. "That depends on whether we reach it before Black Knife reaches us." As if summoned by his words, war cries echoed from the eastern ridge. The Apache scouts had been joined by a much larger force, at least 30 warriors, weapons glinting in the late afternoon sun. The first arrows arced toward them before either Harding or Bishop could issue commands. Chaos erupted as the first volley of arrows found marks among soldiers and rangers alike. Sarah's horse reared in panic, nearly unseating her as an arrow embedded in its flank. Bear steadied her mount with a powerful hand while bellowing orders to form a defensive circle. "Wounded to the center," Harding commanded, his voice cutting through the confusion. "Return fire only with clear targets." Bishop's soldiers responded with less discipline, firing wildly toward the ridge where the Apache had appeared. Their panicked volleys struck nothing but rock and sky as the warriors had already moved to new positions. "They're flanking us," Sarah shouted, spotting movement from the western approach. Without weapons, she felt naked, vulnerable. "Captain, West Ridge." Harding redirected half the rangers instantly, trusting her assessment without question. Bishop took longer to react, his soldiers still firing uselessly toward the eastern position. "Lieutenant," Harding's voice cracked like a whip. "Control. Your men, or we all die here." The rebuke seemed to snap Bishop back to military bearing. He rallied his troops with sharp commands, establishing a perimeter around the combined forces. The Apache attack paused momentarily as both sides assessed the situation. In the brief lull, Harding spurred his horse to Sarah's position. "Status? Unarmed but functional," she reported succinctly. Without comment, he drew a spare revolver from his saddlebag and passed it to her. "Make it count." "Sir," Bishop protested, riding up beside them, "the woman is under arrest." "The woman is the best shot in this company," Harding countered, "and we're under attack. Save your bureaucracy for survivors, Lieutenant." Before Bishop could respond, Black Knife himself appeared atop the western ridge. The Apache leader sat his pony with regal posture, his scarred face impassive as he surveyed the trapped soldiers. "And rangers. He's wearing my father's cavalry hat," Sarah whispered, recognizing the battered keepsake her father had carried from his scouting days. The sight ignited something primal in her chest, not hatred, but a complex tangle of grief and understanding. Black Knife raised his hand, and the attack resumed with coordinated precision. Warriors fired from multiple positions, forcing the defenders to spread their return fire thin. Unlike the chaotic first volley, this assault came with calculated patience, whittling down ammunition and morale with minimal risk to the attackers. A soldier fell from his saddle with an arrow through his throat. One of Garrett's rangers took a bullet in the shoulder, his cry of pain cutting through the gunfire. They were pinned down, outnumbered, with night approaching and wounded mounting. "They're wearing us down," Bear observed grimly, reloading his shotgun. Waiting for dark to finish this, Sarah studied the surrounding terrain with desperate focus, seeking any advantage. The Apache held the high ground on two sides, but the southern approach remained relatively open, gently rolling scrubland offering minimal cover but a potential escape route. "We need to break toward Thompson's station," she told Harding when he circled back to their position. "The southern approach. Make a run while we still have daylight." The captain assessed the option with quick efficiency. "They'll cut down the wounded before we make half a mile." "Not if we give them something more valuable to pursue," she said quietly. Understanding dawned in Harding's eyes. "Absolutely not. It makes tactical sense," she insisted. "I'm what Black Knife really wants, the last of my father's line, the symbolic victory." "You're suggesting using yourself as bait," Harding stated flatly. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I'm suggesting I lead a small diversion east while the main company breaks south. 3 riders should be sufficient to draw their attention." "It's suicide," he objected. "It's strategy," she countered. "And it's my choice to make." Something shifted in Harding's expression, respect tempered with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "And if I ordered you to remain with the company? Then I'd be faced with disobeying my commanding officer," she replied with the ghost of a smile. Again, Black Knife's warriors launched another coordinated volley, bullets and arrows raining. Down from new positions, 2 more soldiers fell, and Jenkins cried out as fresh blood soaked through his bandages. "We're out of time and options," Sarah pressed. "Let me do this, Jack." The use of his given name, never spoken aloud between them before, hung in the air, like a confession. Harding's face softened momentarily, before hardening into command resolve. "Bear goes with you," he decided. "And Carson. I need my most experienced men for this." She nodded, relief and fear mingling in her chest. "We'll draw them northeast, away from your path to Thompson's station." "You'll circle back when you've created sufficient distance," he instructed, his tone brooking no argument. "Rendezvous at the station by dawn." "Yes, sir." Harding hesitated, then reached across the space between their horses to grip her forearm, a gesture of equality and respect between rangers. "Sarah," he said, voice pitched for her ears alone, "come back alive. That's an order." The command carried more weight than professional concern. She covered his hand with hers briefly. "I intend to." Bear appeared at her side as Harding moved away to brief the company on their desperate plan. "Heard I'm riding with you into certain death," the big man remarked dryly. "Just probable death," she corrected, checking the ammunition in her borrowed revolver. "Carson joining us?" "Eager as a hound on a scent trail." Bear nodded toward the lean ranger preparing his horse nearby. "Boy's got something to prove." Bishop intercepted Harding before the captain could complete preparations, his face flushed with anger. "You're sending the prisoner away? Directly violating my authority?" "I'm saving what remains of both our commands," Harding replied coldly. "Unless you have a better tactical solution, Lieutenant." The army officer's jaw worked as he searched for alternatives, and found none. "My report will reflect this insubordination," he finally managed. "Your report can reflect whatever you like," Harding dismissed him, "assuming you live to write it." Sarah, Bear, and Carson positioned themselves on the eastern flank of the defensive circle, readying for their breakout attempt. The plan was simple in concept, nearly impossible in execution: ride hard and fast toward the eastern ridge, drawing the Apache pursuit away from the main company, then circle north before doubling back toward Thompson's station. "On my signal," Harding announced to the combined forces, "Hawkins' team breaks east. Wait 30 seconds, then the main company pushes south at full gallop. No stopping for any reason until you reach the station." Sarah met Garrett's eyes across the circle. The lieutenant nodded once, a gesture of respect she hadn't expected after the revelation of her true identity. Perhaps gender mattered less than competence when survival hung in the balance. "Ready?" Harding asked her quietly. She took a deep breath, thinking of her family, of Black Knife wearing her father's hat, of vengeance transformed into something more complex than she'd imagined when cutting her hair all those days ago. "Ready," she confirmed. Harding fired 3 rapid shots into the air, the signal to begin. Sarah, Bear, and Carson broke from the circle at a gallop, riding directly toward the eastern ridge, where Apache warriors had concentrated. Behind them, the combined Ranger and Army forces held position, waiting the crucial 30 seconds before their own escape attempt. "Keep low," Bear shouted, as bullets and arrows sought them out. "Don't return fire until we've drawn them away from the main group." Sarah's borrowed horse responded valiantly to her commands, stretching into a full run, despite its arrow wound. The distance to the ridge seemed impossible, 300 yards of exposed ground under direct fire from skilled warriors. A bullet creased her upper arm, burning like a branding iron. She ignored the pain, focusing on the rhythm of hooves beneath her and the tactical goal ahead. They needed to be pursued, actively, aggressively, for the diversion to work. 200 yards from the ridge, she risked a glance back. The Apache were indeed responding, warriors breaking from their positions to intercept the small group. The main company remained in their defensive circle, preparing for their southward break. "It's working," Carson called, excitement edging his voice. "Don't celebrate yet," Bear cautioned, as an arrow narrowly missed his head. 100 yards from the ridge, Sarah spotted Black Knife himself leading the pursuit, his pony cutting a diagonal path to intercept them. Their eyes met across the diminishing distance, prey and hunter locked in understanding that transcended language. "North!" she shouted to her companions, abruptly changing direction. "Follow the ridge line!" They veered sharply, parallel to the ridge now rather than toward it. The maneuver bought crucial seconds as the pursuing warriors adjusted their course. Behind them, Sarah heard the thundering hoofbeats of the main company making their break southward, the diversion succeeding as planned. Bear took a bullet in his left arm but maintained his seat and pace. Carson's hat flew from his head. A neat hole punched through its crown. Sarah's horse stumbled briefly as another arrow grazed its flank, then recovered with determined strength. The Apache pursuit focused entirely on their small group now, exactly as she'd hoped. Black Knife himself led the chase, his warriors spreading out to prevent escape to either side. The trap had been flipped, the hunters becoming single-minded in their focus on specific prey. "They're gaining," Carson shouted, as the distance between pursuers and pursued narrowed. Sarah spotted a narrow canyon entrance ahead, barely visible unless one knew where to look. Her father had shown it to her years ago, a hidden passage through the ridge with multiple branches and outlets. "The canyon," she directed, pointing toward the concealed opening. "Single file once we're inside." Bear nodded understanding, but Carson looked confused. "What canyon?" "There's nothing but—" His words ended in a gurgling cry as an arrow found his back, punching through leather and flesh. Carson toppled from his saddle, dead before he hit the ground. "Keep riding," Bear ordered when Sarah instinctively slowed. "Nothing we can do for him now." The canyon entrance opened before them like a mirage, a narrow slash in the seemingly solid rock face. Sarah led them into its shadowed confines, the passage barely wide enough for a single horse. Behind them, Black Knife and his warriors followed, without hesitation, committed to the chase. Twisting passages branched in multiple directions as they penetrated deeper into the canyon system. Sarah navigated from childhood memory, choosing paths that doubled back and intersected, creating a confusing labyrinth for their pursuers. "You know where you're going?" Bear asked, his voice tight with pain from his wounded arm. "My father mapped. These canyons," she confirmed. "There's an exit that leads northwest, back toward Thompson's station if we can reach it before dark." The sounds of pursuit grew more distant as the Apache warriors split up, trying to cover multiple passages. Sarah allowed herself a moment of cautious hope. The plan was working, the main company likely safe on their southward journey by now. They rounded a sharp bend to find their path blocked by fallen rock, a recent rock slide that hadn't existed. When Sarah last traversed these canyons, before they could backtrack, hoofbeats approached from behind. "Trapped," Bear muttered, dismounting with difficulty. "Least we gave the others a chance." Sarah slid from her horse, scanning the canyon walls for any alternative. "There," she pointed to a narrow ledge 20 feet up the western wall. "That shelf runs the length of this section. We can work our way around the blockage." Bear assessed the climb with dubious eyes. "With my arm, unlikely." "Together," she insisted, refusing to abandon him after Carson's loss. The approaching hoofbeats slowed, then stopped. A single voice called out in Apache, the words unintelligible to Sarah, but the tone unmistakable, a demand for surrender. Black Knife had found them. Black Knife had found them. Dusk gathered in the canyon like rising water, shadows pooling in crevices as daylight retreated. Sarah pressed herself against weathered limestone, the rock still holding the day's heat against her back. Beside her, Bear's labored breathing betrayed the toll of his wound, though his grip remained steady on his shotgun. "He's alone," she whispered, peering around the bend where Black Knife waited. "No warriors with him." "Doesn't need them," Bear replied grimly. "Man didn't become war chief by being careless." The Apache leader sat his pony with patient stillness, his silhouette stark against the darkening sky. Her father's cavalry hat cast, his face in deeper shadow, But Sarah could feel his gaze, calculating, measuring, waiting. He wants to talk, she realized suddenly. Otherwise he'd have signaled his warriors by now. Bear shifted, wincing as the movement jarred his wounded. Talk won't save us. Maybe not, she agreed, but understanding might. Before Bear could protest, Sarah stepped into the open, Harding's revolver hanging loose at her side rather than raised. The gesture was deliberate, not surrender, but willingness to listen. Black Knife watched her approach, his scarred face revealing nothing. Up close, she could see the details she'd missed from a distance, grey threaded through his braids, crow's feet at the corners of his eyes, the unmistakable weariness of a man who had fought too long. He spoke a single word, guttural and questioning. "I don't understand your language," Sarah replied, maintaining steady eye contact. "But I know why you attacked my family." Black Knife studied her face with unsettling intensity, then touched her father's hat with deliberate fingers. "Hawkins," he said, the English name harsh on his tongue. "Scout." Sarah nodded slowly. "My father. You killed him. My mother. My sister." Each word scraped her throat raw with renewed grief. "War," Black Knife stated simply. From within his leather pouch, he withdrew a faded daguerreotype, a military photograph showing her father in cavalry scout uniform. The image was creased and water-stained, clearly carried for years. "He killed mine first," the statement hit her with physical force. Not random vengeance then, but specific retribution. Blood for blood, grief for grief, extending backwards through years of mutual atrocity. "The cavalry raid," she breathed. 10 years ago." Black Knife nodded once, his dark eyes reflecting remembered pain. "Wife, children, all." Understanding crystallized with terrible clarity. Her father, the kind man who'd taught her to track and hunt, had also participated in a massacre that widowed Black Knife. The Apache leader had waited a decade for his revenge, carrying her father's photograph as a reminder of his purpose. "So it continues," Sarah said softly. "You kill mine, I join the Rangers to kill yours. More widows, more orphans, more vengeance sought." Something shifted in Black Knife's expression. Not softening exactly, but recognition. He gestured to her. Shorn hair, her men's clothing. "Woman who becomes man," he named her in halting English. "Strong spirit." From behind a rock formation, Bear emerged, his shotgun lowered but ready. "Your warriors come soon," he addressed Black Knife. "What happens then?" The Apache chief's gaze moved between them, calculation evident in his posture. Finally he pointed to a narrow crevice in the eastern canyon wall, barely visible in the fading light. "Path," he stated, "leads out. 3 warriors guard." Sarah translated the implicit offer with disbelief. "You're letting us go." Black Knife touched the brim of her father's hat again. "Blood answers blood. Enough now." He straightened in his saddle, his next words carrying the weight of formal declaration. "Tell your chief, Black Knife takes his people north, beyond the territory. War here finished." "Why?" she asked, the simplicity of the question belying its depth. His weathered face revealed a flash of something profound, perhaps sorrow, perhaps wisdom. "Children should grow old," he answered. "Yours, mine, all." With that, he turned his pony and rode back the way he had come, disappearing around the canyon bend without looking back. The hoofbeats faded until only the whisper of evening wind remained. Bear released a breath he'd been holding. "Well, that was unexpected." "He lost his family too," Sarah said quietly. "We've been mirroring each other's pain." "Pretty philosophical for a man who tried to kill us this morning," Bear observed, though his voice held no rancor. "Think he was telling the truth about the exit?" Sarah studied the crevice Black Knife had indicated. Only one way to find out. The passage proved narrow but navigable, requiring them to dismount and lead their horses single file. True to Black Knife's word, they encountered 3 Apache warriors guarding the exit. Each warrior watched them pass without interference. Though their expressions remained unreadable in the deepening twilight, they emerged onto a broad plateau as the first stars appeared overhead. To the south, Thompson's station glowed with distant lamplight, perhaps 3 hours' ride across the darkened landscape. Bear checked his wounded arm, grimacing as he retied the makeshift bandage. "Still think the captain's going to propose marriage. When we get back." Sarah nearly stumbled at the unexpected teasing. "I've no idea what you're talking about." "Course not," Bear agreed with exaggerated solemnity. "Man looks at all his rangers that way. Real professional concern, that's all." Heat that had nothing to do with the lingering day's warmth rose in her cheeks. "We should focus on reaching the station." "Already focusing," he assured her with the ghost of a smile. "Just making conversation to keep my mind off this arm." They rode through darkness without further discussion, each lost in private thoughts as the station's lights grew gradually larger. Sarah found herself torn between anticipation and dread, relief at completing their mission, warring with uncertainty about what awaited her once they arrived. The Rangers had accepted Sam Hawkins. Would they ever accept Sarah? Thompson's station emerged from the darkness like a fortress. Log walls surrounding a cluster of buildings, the largest flying the Texas flag. As they approached, a sentry's challenge rang out. "Rangers Hawkins and Byrne," Sarah called back, her voice deliberately deepened one final time. "Captain Harding expecting us." The gate swung open to reveal a courtyard bustling with activity despite the late hour. Rangers and soldiers moved with purpose between buildings, caring for wounded, maintaining weapons, preparing defenses. In the center of the organized chaos stood Captain Jack Harding, issuing orders with calm authority. He turned at their approach, relief washing across his features before his command facade reasserted itself. "Hawkins, Byrne, report." "Mission accomplished, sir," Sarah answered formally, dismounting before him. "Pursued by Apache forces as planned, diverted eastward, then circled back as instructed." "Carson?" Harding asked, though his eyes had already registered the answer. "Didn't make it," Bear reported grimly. "Took an arrow before we reached the canyon." Harding nodded, absorbing the loss with the stoicism of a commander who had witnessed too many similar reports. "Lieutenant Garrett is preparing a full accounting of our casualties. 5 Rangers lost, 8 soldiers." "And Lieutenant Bishop?" Sarah asked, noting the army officer's absence. "Composing strongly worded telegrams to his superiors, I imagine," Harding replied dryly. "We had a philosophical disagreement upon arrival." Bear chuckled despite his wound. "Imagine that." "Get that arm tended, Ranger Byrne," Harding ordered. "Doctor's in the main building. Hawkins, walk with me." Sarah followed Harding to a quieter corner of the courtyard, awareness of curious eyes, tracking their movement. Her disguise, tenuous before, now seemed transparent beneath the station's lamplight, her true gender obvious to anyone looking closely. "Black Knife?" Harding asked when they were relatively private. "Letting his people go north," she reported, "beyond territorial boundaries. He says the war is finished." Surprise flickered across Harding's face. "You spoke with him?" "He let us go." She met Harding's gaze directly. "He lost his family in a cavalry raid my father guided. This was blood vengeance, not random Apache hostility." "That doesn't justify—" "No," she agreed quietly. "It doesn't justify, but it explains, on both sides." Harding studied her face with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond surfaces. "You've changed, Sarah Hawkins." "I hope so," she admitted. "I joined the Rangers seeking vengeance. I found perspective instead, and now the question contained multitudes, her future, her identity, her place in a world that offered women few paths to meaningful action. That depends on what options exist," she replied carefully. Harding's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Bishop wants you arrested for impersonating a peace officer." I've convinced him that would create more problems than it solves. How? By pointing out that the publicity would raise uncomfortable questions about Army conduct during this operation. His mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. Lieutenant Bishop is quite concerned with his future prospects. Relief mingled with lingering uncertainty. So I'm free to go? Free to choose, he corrected. The governor's office has been seeking civilian scouts familiar with Apache territory and customs, someone who might help negotiate lasting peace rather than endless war. Hope flickered unexpected. You think they'd accept a woman? They'll accept my recommendation, Harding stated with quiet confidence. Your gender is secondary to your abilities. And the Rangers? We'll adjust to changing times. His voice softened. Though I confess I'll miss Ranger Hawkins' presence. In my company, the admission contained layers beyond professional regard. Sarah felt the weight of possibilities stretching before her, paths unavailable mere days ago, suddenly opening. What about Sarah Hawkins? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Will you miss her too? Harding's hand found hers in the shadows between them, warm and certain. I look forward to making her acquaintance properly, without deception between us. I'd like that, she admitted, allowing herself to imagine such a future. Though I warn you, I'm keeping my brother's clothes. Dresses are impractical for riding. His laugh, rare and genuine, warmed her more than any campfire. I wouldn't have it any other way. Dawn broke over Thompson's Station with hesitant beauty, painting the desert in gold and shadow. Sarah stood on the station's wall, watching the sunrise transform the landscape. She had slept in women's clothes borrowed from the station keepers. Wife? Her first night as herself in what felt like a lifetime. Below in the courtyard, Rangers prepared to ride, Harding's company returning to Fort Davis with their wounded and dead. Lieutenant Bishop's soldiers had departed hours earlier, eager to distance themselves from the uncomfortable alliance. Bear joined her at the wall, his arm properly bandaged and supported in a sling. So, scout for the governor's office. Impressive. Career change. If they'll have me, she tempered, they'd be fools not to. He squinted at the horizon thoughtfully. Though I suspect a certain captain might have personal as well as professional interest in your appointment. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. Your observations are unnervingly accurate, Ranger Byron. Part of my charm, he agreed amiably. Rangers will miss you, you know, those who knew the truth anyway. Garrett sends his regards, says any woman who can shoot and track like you deserves whatever position she wants. The acknowledgement meant more than she'd expected. And you? Will the legendary Bear Byrne miss having a woman in disguise riding beside him? Might miss Sam Hawkins, he allowed with gruff affection. But I look forward to knowing Sarah properly. He nodded toward the courtyard, where Harding stood watching them. Seems I'm not the only one. She smiled, a genuine expression that felt foreign after so many days of careful control. Safe travels, Bear. Try not to get shot again before I see you. Same to you, he returned, touching his hat brim in salute before descending to join the departing Rangers. Harding approached as Bear departed, his expression softer than she'd seen during their mission. Governor's representative arrives tomorrow, he informed her. I've drafted a full recommendation. Thank you, she said simply. For what it's worth, he added quietly. You were one of the finest Rangers I've ever commanded, man or woman. High. And praise from Captain Jack Harding. Jack, he corrected gently, when it's just us. Jack, she echoed, testing the intimacy of it. He gestured toward his waiting company. I need to lead them home, but I'll return within the month. Perhaps by then you'll have established yourself in your new position. Perhaps, she agreed, allowing hope to bloom fully. I'll look forward to your return. Their goodbye remained proper, witnessed as it was by dozens of Rangers and station personnel. But the promise in his eyes as he mounted his horse spoke volumes beyond words. Sarah watched the rangers ride out, Bear's massive form distinctive among them, Harding's straight-backed leadership at their head. She remained at the wall long after. They disappeared into the morning haze, contemplating the unexpected turn her quest for vengeance had taken. She had joined the Rangers as Samuel Hawkins, seeking blood for blood. She emerged as Sarah Hawkins, seeking something infinitely more complex and valuable, understanding, purpose, perhaps even contentment. Her hand drifted to her short-cropped hair, a tangible reminder of her transformation. She would let it grow, now but not too long. Practicality would always outweigh convention in her choices. From the eastern horizon, a lone eagle soared above the desert, riding thermals with effortless grace. Sarah watched its flight, sensing a kindred spirit in its solitary journey. Like the eagle, she had found unexpected freedom in the vast and unforgiving territory, not by denying who she was, but by embracing all of it, the strength and the vulnerability. Alike, the future stretched before her, unwritten and full of possibility. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.